Yes.
Yeah, okay. So bonus tools in Maya is where Bobby's going to be UVing. Basically, you don't need any experience to do this or follow along or whatever, because Bobby's going to be doing pretty basic introductory stuff. There is a model provided on the Facebook page.
Yes, and we will be providing on the Twitch when the time comes.
Right, and when the time comes, if you are watching from home or going on Facebook, you can download the model we'll be working off of there. Yeah, so I don't think I have anything important to announce other than this is the last meeting. So thank you all for coming, and check us out next semester. We got a lot of cool stuff coming up. We'll have more guest speakers and all kinds of crazy things happening next semester. So, we have a bake sale next Wednesday. So come and eat our delicious snackies while you're super stressed out. And we will be selling leftover holiday sale stuff. So the wrapping paper that we promised everyone is actually here, and you can buy it. So wrapping paper, greeting cards, buttons, all kinds of cool stuff. Anyways, Bobby, take it away.
I will do that. Hello everyone, as I set up this camera, which we don't really even need, and I'll probably turn off halfway through. All right. Hi everyone, my name is Robert Lauer. I'm a senior at the Cleveland Institute of Art. You might know me from such presentations like Pixel Art 2016 and Basic UVing 2015. So the reason we're really doing this right now is the Blizzard contest is coming up, and there's 3D character and 3D environment, and last year not many people here got into it, and there's a little bit of a barrier. So we're doing this kind of presentation to get people more into the UVing and texture side of unwrapping characters and everything like that. And I'll get into some Blizzard character examples as well as my entry and everything as we go on. But I'm going to explain what a UV is. So when you're working in 3D, you have your X, Y, and Z coordinates. So that's 3D space. X, Y is 2D space, and Z adds that 3D space. So the UV stands for an extra space. I'm going to go into a presentation. This was just a rough presentation I made before this. So a UV is a flat unwrap of a 3D character or object. So it's easy to think of it as like a cube that you papercraft, that you take the paper and fold it into a cube. So, or papercraft characters and things like that. You do that with a character or an object, and the more complex the character, especially humanoids and creatures and monsters, the more complex the unwrap usually is. Now, the goal for games to use these UVs is to get as much space as you can. In video games, you only have a limited amount of room in your game, and you want to use as much of it as you can because of data space and everything like that. So these UVs, you want to spread them out and take up as much of the usable space as you can so that you have more room to paint on. So when you go into texturing, that means there's more resolution for the character to paint on. And here's an example of a little Mario papercraft. So when you fold them back out, like this is, on the left would be the UV, and on the right would be the model when it's folded up and textured. Now I'm gonna go over some of my embarrassing UVs over time. So you want your UVs to take up as much space as you can. And on the left, that's a UV when I first started 3D in high school, and I was just kind of messing around. I had no guidance. And that was just a straight unwrap from 3ds Max. I didn't manipulate them at all. And I started painting anyway. You can see up at the top right there, those are all just a ton of finger pieces. So up there, there's like the left of the finger and the right of the finger. And then this is, you know, the front of the chest. That's probably the best part right there. But that's so small. Now over here is my first ever fully painted 3D character, and I just did it for the Blizzard contest last year. And this was the first time I had ever done anything like this. So it was really, you know, sink or swim. And since this, I've already gotten better at UVing. And I'm going to go over a character that I've UV'd recently, and I'm in the process of painting. And you can see how I've used more space. So generally, when you're UVing a character, you'll want to give more space to the face, because the face is the part of the character that people are paying the most attention to. The eyes, everything like that. Whereas, you know, the bottom of the feet, which is foot right there, it doesn't need that much space because no one's going to see it. And then the crystals, there are 3 crystals on his arm, but there's only 2 crystals. This one is for his head, that's coming out of his face right there. And then that top right one, all three of those crystals are actually the same mesh that I just copy and pasted over his arm, so they all three share the same UV. So instead of having to paint 3 different crystals, I only paint one, and it applies it to all 3 of them. And I'll go over UV overlapping as I do a demo. So there's UV resolution, and as with pixel art and games in general, you want things to be in squares. You can do rectangular UVs, which I don't know exactly how to do. I know Overwatch uses them in some other games, and it's a new thing that's coming up right now. And if anybody knows how to do it, tell us in the comments, because I actually really want to learn this, and I'm in the middle of researching it now because I want to experiment with it. But you do squares of 2 and 4, so 32, 32 would not be great, but then 64, 64, and on the right here is a unwrap that a professor at the school gave me that's good for environments. So 4096, 4096 is usually the biggest map you'll have, and I used one map for the entire interior of an environment, and that was a 4096, 4096. So at the bottom left there, you can see how it's applied, and the reason you have the checker pattern is to check to see if there's any deformations. You don't want to see warping in the checkers, and you also can look at it and see if the checkers are about the same size on each face of your character. But this is a good way to organize and check for environments as well as characters. And you can download some maps offline that are usually rainbow, so you can tell which areas of the map are where. So I'm going to be UVing a barrel today because it's really simple, and then we're going to go over painting it. And we are going to share a link to this simple barrel that I made that has UV overlapping, and you guys can paint on it in Photoshop. And the reason we're going to be using Photoshop rather than something like Modo, I believe Modo, or 3D Coat is because most people have easier access to Photoshop, especially at this school. And you can still do really stylized paints in it. And if you know how to paint in Photoshop, you can 3D paint in Photoshop. It's just cheaper and really easy to use. It's not the best, but you can get the job done in it, and I actually really like doing it. So I actually UV everything in Maya, and I use something called bonus tools, which before you still have I believe the school has it downloaded, but in order to use it, it's a plugin provided by Autodesk. So I don't know why it's not included with it, because it's like so amazing, because it has like stretchy IK UVing tools and everything like that. You can also UV using something called Roadkill. So this is the barrel, and it's already UV'd, so I'm gonna un-UV it here in a second. So what I'm doing right now is I have select shell for UV, and each one of these is a UV face. So over here at the top right, there's something right here. While you're in polygons and modeling tab, you can select the UV editor, and now this is the flat, unwrapped version of the barrel. And I've actually morphed it so that I have a more horizontal view of the barrel. Right now I'm in shell. I'm going to turn this off, darken the background. Actually, we'll get rid of the background for now. So this is the unwrapped shell of the barrel. And these edges are called seams. And a good way to think about unwrapping a character or an object is think of it like clothing. You want to hide the seams, because that's where you're going to have to, work it so that it looks like there isn't a break in the texture. So if you look at your clothes, they usually hide the seams under your arms or on your sides or in the insides of your pants and everything like that. Especially jackets and coats are good to look at. So you want to try and hide the seams as best as you can in areas where people aren't going to be looking. So I have overlapping UVs here. So if I go into shell, right click and select shell and just highlight all this, you'll see that I highlight all of the faces here. And that's because if I just select one here and delete, and then another one and delete, and this one I only used one there and delete. I can delete these too. These are actually separate. I had forgotten about that. And they don't even line up because I wanted it to look a little different. Ooh, it's been a long time since I've done this on this model. This is the same model I used for a previous demo last year. I just never got around to finishing it. So this is really what the model is. And then I just duplicated it. So I made sure that the rotate point is at the center here of the world. And then I just Shift D to create a copy. And then I can rotate it a little bit. I delete the top parts so there aren't duplicates there. But then I can, if I get it just right, and then Shift D again. And then eventually I could go in and delete the faces that I don't want to use and then sew them back together. And now all of them would have an overlapping UV here. So if I paint on one face, it'll paint on all of them. So that way I have a lot more resolution. And you're really only looking at one side of this barrel at any given time. So you won't really notice the tessellate, like how all of the boards look exactly the same. So I'm going to go back. And we're going to UV this barrel really fast. Are we at one barrel? Yeah. So there are different ways to UV, and I know some people who still do the old technique, which is called planar mapping. And I don't know if I can delete the UV here, but I can try by opening up bonus. Nah, we'll just do it this way. So actually, let's see if I can start completely anew. Because I might have an older version of the barrel that has no UVs on it. Looks like it. Nope. Maybe. I think it just has a really crappy UV. Yeah, it just has a really crappy UV. That's not what we want. We want no UV. Whoa. I think this was in the process of UVing or right after. Oh, there we go. This was one without any UVs on it at all. Except it looks like I was in the process. So this green texture is something that comes from bonus tools, and it helps you see where you're placing your seams much easier. Oh, this is really old. This was before I duplicated that. Well, I'll go over what planar mapping is real quick, because I still use it sometimes. So you can select the faces here. If I select the individual faces on this, I'll leave that one up top. So I want to UV this all into one side. So as long as I have this open, so you can see I've selected the shell faces, the UV faces over here. And then I can shift click and do planar map. So this is the flat unwrap of that texture. So this was the older way of doing it. So you select the faces and then you can rearrange them. And Maya has a built-in UV checker. And you can see up top how distorted it is because I haven't done a planar unwrap on these faces yet. But down here I have, and you can still see a little distortion. So then I'd go in and planar map up here as well.
It's funny how they give you that green texture when everything you highlight kind of turns like greenish.
You'll see when I get into bonus tools because it gives you that greenish texture because when you highlight things while bonus tools is up, when you're selecting edges, it turns red. So it makes it really easy to see what you're selecting, especially when you create the seams. So I'll just planar map this. And you can see this isn't what I had before because it gives you a little bit of it, and then I believe I can go in here and do an unfold, and it gives it a little better. I can select this. And over here, there's polygons, and there's a bunch of UV tools, a lot you'll almost never use, but they have unfold and layout, which is really good. So unfold will give a more optimized layout of the shell that you just unwrapped. So you can see the checkers are much better now. Same over here. But this isn't that shape I had before because I actually reshaped it. And these tools up here, this one says which way the shell is facing. So blue is good. You want it to be this blue because that means it's facing the correct way and it's not inverted in any way. If it's red, so if I invert this, that means the UV is inversed. So this edge that would normally be connecting up there, it's now reversed. So when you start painting it, you might deal with some weird painting problems. Oh, there's the top there. And you can see that really needs to be planar mapped. So I'm just going to do that real quick. And there's this big round circle, which sometimes a lot of people keep it this way because you like it to be asymmetrical when you do the lid of a barrel or a character like that. I usually split it down the middle, and you can do that and rearrange some of these UVs. So I'll actually do an example, and I'll cut this. So over here, I can go into polygons, cut UV edges, and now these two are separate because I cut them. But if I had two UV edges that I wanted to put back together in some way, I could select, and you see if I select here, it selects both edges because those two edges are meeting on the model over here. So I'll select these three and then hold shift and right click and hold the right click and move and sew UVs. So now they're back together. And I can move them around as one again. And I like doing the barrel this way. This is just a personal preference. You can also right click and cut that way. So I separate them that way because then I can make them take up more space in this way. And then the bottom, I can have it more formed like that. And that, again, that's just a personal preference. A lot of people will do shields and they'll just have the big circle in the corner or something and then they'll try to wrap around it. This is just a personal preference. But now, we're gonna reload this. I'm gonna load another barrel. And we're gonna use some the technique that I typically use, which is bonus tools. But first, I'm going to delete some of the parts of this and get back to where I want to be. Oh. That'll be fine for what I'm showing because I already have the barrel that is provided is already unwrapped and ready for everybody to use when we get into the painting stage. Also, so up here you can see that this one is red and that means it's facing the wrong way. Quick way to fix that, go ahead and select the shell. If this happens, select the shell and in here you have flip, fixed. And I got it to look this square format by manipulating it, and there's a little bit of stretching. White means that it's good, and red means that I believe it's... Actually, let's find out. I always forget. Okay, blue means that it's stretched, and you can see down here what it's doing. And then red means it's contracted. And then if I invert it like that, you can see what it does. Like that purple. So sometimes when you unwrap a hand, you'll have this happen, and you just have to go in and clean it up yourself. So I'm going to bonus tools this now, which will kill all, I'm actually going to open the outliner and make sure that I go up here and delete by type, non-deformer history, just to clean up all of that stuff in the outliner. Make sure nothing crazy is going to happen. Okay, outliner, we're done with you. And I'm going to open up bonus tools at the top here. All of the Mayas at the computer here have it. If you don't have it, you can just go to the Autodesk website or search bonus tools Maya and download it, and then it'll install it. You'll have to close Maya, then reopen Maya, and it'll be right here. So you have UV editing down here, and then the auto unwrap UVs tool. It does not exactly do what it sounds like. So you can pretty much just confirm all of this, set edge color to red, set mesh shader to green, create checker shader. I'm going to get rid of the checker shader because I'm going to create it myself and show everybody how you do that. So I'm going to enter the tool and close. So it gave me this green color. And now we have these tools up here. So it automatically defaults you to selecting the edges of a mesh. And that's because you're creating the seams. Rather than selecting the faces and doing a planar map of them, I can select the edges and create seams of clothing. And then in the end, as all the seams are there, I'll hit this continue button and it'll automatically unfold and place them around the map. So typically select a big one like that, add borders, there we go. And you can see it has a thicker line now, add border. Add border. Oops. Add border. And done. What I just did in the planar mapping, which took a while, I just finished in less than 30 seconds. And that's really why I like bonus tools, as well as it's really easy to just like fix anything you do. So you could try it out and then see that it doesn't work someplace and just do it again, or because I'll hit continue. Oh, I think it gave me an error because I have something that it doesn't like. Bonus tools sometimes does that. Unfold. Yep. So it did one of the bonus tools errors that I love. So we're missing the lid. The lid. So where did the lid go? Well, the lid is actually, it's in the UV. It's there. This is something that's been happening with 2017. I don't know if it's always been there. It's at this bottom corner here, and it's so tiny, it's microscopic, so even if you scaled it forever, it's not even going to show up. So what you can do is come down here, select it, and just shift, planar map, there it is. So you can get it back that way. And then I'll just cut the edge. And it's good because these two parts go right together to not scale them separately. I don't want to scale this down and then move it because it'll be hard to get back. So I'll move those up there, just down here. I can scale this. And
where did we get the barrels? Sorry, where did we get the barrels?
I posted a link on the CIA Digital Media Club Facebook, as well as we are going to share it on the Twitch page when we get to the painting part. Right now you can even UV a cube if you want. Cube is the easiest way to just think about how you would take a paper cube and fold it up. Just drop a normal cube in Maya and mess around with it with the tools. And after this, I'll go through a couple characters I've UV'd and show it. So these are all pretty white. There's a little bit of red right there, but we can clean that up. And I'm actually going to stretch this and everything. And you can see that it's actually still white, so it's not upset with my deformation yet. A little bit on the blue and red on the sides now. And actually, I wanted to show some of the Blizzard contests stuff.
So what is the Blizzard contest?
The Blizzard contest is a contest that Blizzard hosts every year for students, and I recommend doing it. They have an environment contest. Oops, I'm going to do student. They have an environment contest and a character contest, where it's pretty much make a World of Warcraft character or environment, something that's special and unique, but feels like it would be in the world. And it's not just like character design contest, it's how well can you paint the character, how well can you model it, how well can you implement it, and like really create character and personality. So, past years, this was the winner last year. Let's get the image up. Look how tight the UV is. There's almost zero negative space that's not being used. And you can see that his face is asymmetrical. He didn't just cut it in half and use the same thing because it probably has some scars and slight differences. And also how big the face is taking up here. But in the chest actually isn't taking that much because the chest is a lot of gradients. And he also made the chest and the back almost square. And this right here is the arm of the character. I really like this UV. Even though I lost to him, I can learn a lot, and this is really nice. So this is the arm, and that's all the muscles and everything like that. But then, he really focused on the armor because that was going to be the most eye-catching aspects of this character. The face, the armor, whereas the chest and muscles were there mostly as filler. They don't grab your eye nearly as much as these crystals and the face do. But, he also has the staff in there. So he has the prop in there and all the crystals. And this is how you present the Blizzard contest as well. Some past...
Did the company Blizzard pick the favorites, or was it
The Blizzard looks at all of them and then announces the winner. And the winner gets usually ends up as an intern there. And there's one winner. And then they'll do a lot of honorable mentions. They didn't do a lot of honorable mentions this past year. The only honorable mention I believe they had was Goaty the Goat, who actually I feel like he almost would have won if he didn't break the rules. The rules of the Blizzard contest are pretty much you can only have 6,000 triangles. That's the limit of your model, so it's pretty low poly. So whatever number of quads you have, squares you have on your character, it's double that. So you really only have 3,000 squares. And this character was just a little bit over 6,000, and then you're only supposed to use one UV map. So he had 2 UV maps, and the resolution is 1024 by 1024. But this was a runner-up. This was a winner in a past year. So this UV actually wasn't that fantastic, but the paint job was incredible, as well as the character concept was incredible as well. And it's just very well executed. But that was a winner. This was a runner-up. I believe this was the first winner.
Well, they really progressed since then.
Yeah, it's been around for, I think, 4 or 5 years now. This was the environment winner last year, I believe.
So there's no, like, you don't have to have a UV map and stuff in the environment?
Nope. Mainly, they just want to see the environment and how you painted it. And it looks like they might have probably put this in Unreal, like a random game engine, because Unreal just makes everything look pretty right off the bat. Added some fog and everything like that. This was a runner-up one year. The Dove Mecha, or I think it was an honorable mention. So I'll go over some cool stuff with that. Oh, this isn't the blue. Student contest. So yeah, I recommend everybody give a shot at the Blizzard contest, even if it's an awesome learning experience. Whoa! I left Maya and came back, and what has happened? Oh, I think I smoothed it, didn't I? Okay. Oh god, I thought I broke it. All right, so I'm gonna come over here and select the UVs. Now there's a difference between UV selection and vertice selection. So while it looks like I'm just selecting the vertice, when I select UV, there is a difference. So if I say select over here and select vertex, grab the vertexes over here. Oops. Is there a way to select your vertex? Up there it is. So if I select the vertexes on this, it'll actually move the geometry over here. So, oops. Sometimes. Or maybe they fixed that. That's interesting. But it's not the same thing as grabbing the UV. Because if I select the vertex and I grab an aspect, you can see I grab this vertice here, which is also connected to the vertice there. Those are both the same vertice, but they're different UVs. So if I want to move this to reshape the UV, I'm actually moving both of those, even though I don't really want to. But if I right click and select UV, I can move this one independently. And then that's how I really reshape this. That's how he probably got the chest to be square and everything like that. But you still have to be careful too. So I'm going to scale these in until it's flat. So I don't really have any deformation yet. Still no real deformation. And a little bit of deformation is to be expected. And you're going to be painting on it, so sometimes you just have to cater to the deformation. And I'm not going to finish this because I think you get the gist. It's sometimes really tedious work. Just like skin weight painting. If anybody's rigged before, you'll know what that's like. But I can scale this and make it straight, like a flat orthographic view. So it could be a little bit easier to paint on. And I'd put those there up top, and then in the UV I have this complete. This was the one that I spent more time flattening out, where I selected the UVs and really had to reshape it. And I'll leave this on and just reshape until I see as little white as I can, kind of thing. See, that would be bad. What's up?
If you have multiple parts to an object, would you use the same UV?
So what you can do if you have multiple parts.
Like multiple objects? Like
Yeah. So you can UV them all separately, and then, so I'll,
Put them on the same.
yes, so I'll duplicate this, and this has, so I'll actually move its UVs around. And the question was, if anybody on Twitch didn't hear it, was, what do you do if you have multiple objects, but you want them on the same UV sheet? So I will like scale this one, and I'll make these ones smaller too, and mush them over there, rotate this. So these have different UVs right now. But what I could do is select both of the objects, and if the UV editor is open, you'll see them both show up. So then I could just move them around. And that's how I did an environment. So that's how each one of my environment assets that I modeled in Maya and just had in like a straight row all lined up, all the bricks, all the stones, all the walls were all just lined up in Maya. And then when I wanted to put them all on the same UV sheet, I selected them all and just went crazy rearranging all of them. And to create your own checker pattern, because I typically like to do that. Or you can import your own offline. So you could UV checker. There are a ton of these, which are all rainbow and everything like that. So you can tell which parts of your character are where. If I had the face over here, it'd have that like red magenta color, and down here it'd be like green. Some people like that. I like just doing a black and white, so I'm going to go into the material. Sometimes it won't let me because, I already have a checker applied. Let's see if it'll let me apply it. Well, look at that. So the way I create these, and this is what you're here to look for, is deformations in the checkers and to make sure they're the same size. So if these checker patterns were different sizes, and the way I created that was, Maya has a default, so can I load it up? Graph network. There it is. So I just created a Lambert, went into the color tab and said, make it a checker. So over here you select this, and you can select checker. Then in the last box here, you can say it's repeat. So I have it on repeat 8. So before, I believe it starts off as a 4, which just makes the checkers way bigger. I typically go with 8. And to make it easy to look at on the eye, I go over here and I change the colors from white and gray rather than white and black. I just find it easier to look at. And I don't like using the color one too often. It's just a personal preference. But now, if I come over here and grab that, you can see what it does to the checkers. Or if I were to scale this one independently from the other. Those two have to connect to each other, and that's going to be really weird to get that to look seamless. But if they're the same size, it's a lot easier. And for an example character UV, I'm going to open up. This is a character I've been working on in my spare time, and I might work on a little bit today. And Lisa, this will apply to you because, whoa, this is actually 2 characters, but I consider this one a little prop. So this is a frog in a raincoat, and the hat is a separate object and everything, and his little pipe, that's a separate object. Eyes are separate objects. And this is a separate object, but if I select them all, here's the UV sheet. So I used a lot more space effectively this time. And the reason these are purple isn't because they are flipped, it's because there are 2 UVs stacked on top of each other. So because I modeled half of the character and then UV'd this half and then flipped it over, it copies the UVs. So that's why you can see 2 here, but if I highlight, I select both, is they share the same UV, and this is why the face takes up so much space over here. So if I paint on this cheek, it'll paint on both sides, so it's symmetrical. But they're overlapping each other. And this one's red, which is okay because it literally is the inverse of the other side.
So this puts a seam right down the center of the face. Is that a problem?
It's an easier one to paint over than other areas because it's has much higher resolution, where a lot of the other seams are hidden underneath here, like on the other underside of the arm. And I made the arm a lot more rectangular. Here's his coat. And then the lantern, I pretty much gave the lantern this whole space up here. And the lantern, I actually only modeled 1/4 of him and duplicated it 4 times so that I could preserve more space. And I might paint a little bit of this today if I have time. And the hat is actually asymmetrical because it's a little lily pad kind of shape. So it actually does have separate UVs. So top, other half, bottom, everything like that. And when UVing a character, you'll usually put some seams on the underside of the arm, around the wrist there. I'm going to turn off the texture. Around the wrist. And then you'll actually cut the hand in half. This is what I've done in the past, and I've seen others. You'll cut the hand in half and then sew it back together on the thumb side. Did I do that on him? Yes. And this is the underside. Or is this the foot? It's actually been a very long time since I've worked on this character. It's almost been a month. So yeah, that's the foot and leg. But this hand, I actually, because it gives a weird deformation if you just cut down the seam here. So if I just went over here and put the seam and left it a little bit hanging, it'll unwrap it weird in the first place. So I actually did cut the hand completely in half. And then when they were both separate halves, I can cut it here and turn that off. So they were separate and everything like that. I just selected both halves and I did the sew along the edge and put the hand together, which one made it a lot easier to place amongst everything else, as well as it made it easier to create the seam. So it might be hard to create the seam on the finger over here. This is where seams get hard when you start painting, but at least on this side, it will not be hard to create the seam. And then the undersides don't have as much room or space given to them. Oops. So that doesn't have that much space. It's mostly there to give a gradient and show the shadow. The underside of the foot is really tiny because no one cares. He has a space under here, which is a little bit larger, but the face is huge. One, because his face actually is huge, as well as it has a lot of topology and a lot of detail that I want to give to it. And the mouth, this is all inside of the mouth right there. That's actually pretty small. And there are some spots that are stretched, and I'm cleaning it up. But it's not stretched in areas that are important. So you won't really notice it when I'm painting it. For example, if I apply a checker, you don't notice too much real deformation. And now I'm going to show a quick way on how to make life easier for people who want to do more advanced painting and everything like that. Let's see. Where you can have Maya do half of your work for you. Is this the right one? I think it is. Okay, so I was just messing around. This is Mudbox. Normally people probably will sculpt in ZBrush, but I just decided to do this real quick, just not to show off any sculpting ability because I'm not sculpting anything. But you can do this where I can sculpt a little bit of the barrel in here. And I'm just actually going to make another couple lines just to be ugly here. And the reason I'm doing this is I'm creating these indents, which I can actually do something called baking and bake it into the low poly model and then paint on top of that when we get to Photoshop. It'll all make sense in a minute. Oops. Oh, oh. So I'm just going to select the object and export the selection as an FBX, or I'm going to do it as an OBJ. I'll just do it to the desktop. We'll go back to Maya here and import that high poly. So we have the barrel high poly OBJ. It's going to be a very dense model. Oh, it did not sync up correctly. So you can see that it's just glowing green because of how dense it is. And I'm going to move it right inside of this barrel here. And basically, I can go into the rendering. And Lisa, you were asking about this earlier. So, and I can go into the lighting. Oh no, where is it? Lighting, shading, transfer maps. So it'll open up this. So the target mesh right now is the high poly barrel, and I actually don't want that. I want the target mesh to outliner be the low poly. So I'm going to add the low poly to the target mesh. And then the source mesh is going to be the high poly. And then I'm going to select normal map. And for those who don't know, a normal map. And actually, I'm using Maya, but there are much better programs. I typically use XNormals, but unfortunately the school computers here do not have XNormal installed. XNormal is fantastic, and it's also free. You can also use Crazy Bump if you have like textures you've already painted and everything. You can use a lot of things. I think even Photoshop has a UV generator, but not like this. So, or normal generator. Normals are flat, like these give light data to look at and to replicate 3D appearance. So if I put this brick texture on a flat surface, when the light hits it, it'll actually render it as if it was a 3D object. So use this in games because you don't want to render out each brick that's really high poly. This is, but you give it normal maps so it replicates and looks like it's higher poly. So I want to see if we have a picture of it in action. Is this a good one? So yeah, this is actually a flat surface. No, that actually looks like they modeled it in the end. Come on. If you open up Unreal and really look at any texture that they have in there, it'll really show it. Normal map. There we go. So the flat cube with a normal map is still a flat cube, but it looks like it has the depth in it that it does. Character before normal map, super low poly. Character after normal map. But we're using a normal map for a different reason. So I'm going to just project this onto the desktop. I'm going to do a PNG. Tangent space. I need to, it's at 256 right now. I want this to be a 1024 by 1024. Because that's a higher resolution. I'm going to go with Gaussian. This should all be fine. Source mesh, high poly, and bake and close. So it's going to take a minute, but what it's doing right now is it's going to take all of that high poly here. Also, this is going to go crazy because I found out earlier today that there are some reversed normals on this barrel, or it might just have something to do with the baking in Maya, because when I tested the facing normals, which I'll show you guys, everything looked okay, but I'm probably missing something. Look at it go. But what it's going to do is it's going to take all of that information from that high poly sculpt and bake it as a flat image right on top of this low poly image so that when light hits it, it'll look like the high poly. Is it almost done? Did it do it? Am I going crazy? I might have messed something up, even though I just did this 5 minutes ago. So I'm just going to, let's go into Photoshop because that's not actually what we want it for. We just want this normal map. Oh boy, that is not a good normal map, and this is why I don't like Maya.
It's beautiful.
That was art.
I'm just going to grab a normal map because I just want to show, because I'm not going to waste a ton of time trying to fix my normal map when I just want to show a simple thing. I'm just going to grab a normal map of, we'll do this face, this grumpy old man. I do not own this. I'm just showing this for demo purposes. So I'm going to copy the image and I'm just going to. So the reason I want to grab the normal map, because this is more for stylized paints. So that Blizzard contest, you're not allowed to have a normal map. It's only one map and it's the diffuse map, which is only color. So a lot of web games and everything like that, they use only diffuse maps and everything like that. Maybe some speculars because it's harder to render all the bump maps at one time. If you're doing a raid in World of Warcraft and you have 100 people all in one location, that's a lot to render. So they paint the shadows in, which gives it a much more painterly look in the first place, and I love how it looks. But to make it easier for you when you start painting the 3D object, you can render out the normal map. Now, the normal map is full of these colors. The blue, anywhere where you see blue, is light that is hitting straight onto the object, like flat right against it. The red, I believe, is the y-axis, so light that's coming from the right, and green is light that's coming straight down and hitting the object. So what we can do to make it painting easier is go into the channel boxes where we have red, green, blue, red, green, and blue, and select only green. This is not a great UV for this. I'm going to grab this one. Maybe this one will give a better example. So if I select green only, I have the lighting data that I can just paint on top of to make it a little easier for myself. So this will render light from top down. So when painting a character, instead of having to completely recreate or imagine where the lighting would be, you can just do this. So you can at least paint on top of this. Oops. Oh yeah, I have to render this out. I actually have to save this as, but I can paint on top of it and use an overlay mask so that it'll be much easier to paint the character rather than trying to recreate the shadow. So now I'm going to go over how to paint in Photoshop. So this is the barrel in Photoshop when I import it. Right now it's a flat color, so I'm going to go, so I'll just create a new document. 1024 by 1024, 72, RGB, white, custom. All right, so I created a new document. Lisa, you had a question?
Yes, do you get the normal map by bringing your OBJ into Photoshop? Or?
No, I just grabbed it. Oh, that normal map? Yeah, I was just opening up the pre-rendered normal map. It didn't bake it onto the object like I had wanted.
But it's fine.
Yeah, it's kind of weird because I did it like 10 minutes before I started this presentation, so I don't know what I did wrong this time. But normally you can do that and bake it right into mine. I can show you right after this. But really, I just wanted it for Photoshop if people want to do that. So like for the character I'm going to be doing for this Blizzard contest this year, I'm going to do a really low poly, then a high poly sculpt, then bake that high poly sculpts in for like lighting information, and paint on top of that so I can, paint the muscles a lot easier rather than completely trying to imagine where all these detailed muscles and fur are. It just makes it a little bit easier in the long run because it's easier for me to paint or to sculpt in those details rather than it is to paint them in. So I created a new document. Normally you'll be in Essentials. And now I'll go to 3D up at the top of Photoshop. New 3D layer from File. So this is where you can download that OBJ barrel I gave everybody if you want it, or you can paint on any 3D object that you're working on now. I know some people are working on some characters. But new 3D layer from File, and we're gonna grab the barrel. And it's going to ask you are about to create a new 3D layer. Would you like to switch to a 3D workspace? Just go ahead and say yes. And now we're 3D painting in Photoshop. This was the barrel I had done in a previous year. And I really I've never really finished it, and I wanted to actually kind of restart because I'm not happy with how this looks. And I mean, again, another project I just haven't finished because of other projects getting in the way. So we're going to move on. So here's the UI in the 3D Photoshop. You have the infinite light up there. So right now you can see that I have a little bit of lighting. It's flat back here and everything like that. So I have a little bit of lighting to show that where the different faces are. And if I grab a random color, oh, I can use my tablet now, and start painting, I can paint directly on the object. And you can see that if I paint a line here, it's on the other sides as well. Circle, triangle. So this is those overlapping UVs. So instead of having to paint every single face of this barrel differently, I only have to paint 3, which saves for time, as well as I can make those 3 faces a lot more detailed. Now to navigate in the 3D Photoshop, down here in the left, if you have the brush selected, is it just the brush? It's just the brush. Oh, and then if you have the navigation tool, the V or V for short, you can navigate that way by selecting on it. But if you're in brush, down here in the left, you have orbit, the 3D camera. So if you just click on that and start moving around, you'll orbit, rotate around it. If you select the middle one, which is panning, you can pan around. And then the last one is zoom. So you can zoom in and out on your object. And painting on the 3D object like this helps, you know, figure out your seams. So let's find an area where there's a seam. There's actually a seam right here, I believe. We can check in a second. And to paint directly on the UVs, like that flat image to get more detailed, on the right here you still have your layers, and inside the 3D object there's an unwrapped layer. So this is the unwrap, and you can, over here there's the UV overlay. Now this UV overlay is actually pretty much a vector image, so these do not snap to the pixels of your image. You can, if you want, I might do it. Never done this way. You can also paint if you don't have 3D Photoshop, like a recent version. You can come in here, polygons, UV snapshot, and we'll res this up to 1024. Put this on the desktop. UV, oh snap. From tool settings, save. Image format, we'll go PNG to keep the transparency. Okay. Save file. So if I do want to overlay it and see where the pixels match up on these seams, desktop. UV, oh snap. So I made it white, but so this is where the seams line up pixel-wise. Whereas on here, if I keep zooming in, it's a vector. I'm gonna create a gray layer behind here. That is brown. It's a vector, so it's actually falling in between those 2 pixels, so that's really where my seam is. And this is possibly an easier way for some people to understand how to paint. So I can move this and have them on top of each other if I wanted. So now if I look at my 3D object, I can see where the seams are. Go away, UVO snap. And when working in this flat view, you never really need to save it. Anything you paint on there is over here. Though there are some bugs with the Photoshop painter that are still around. I'm not sure if it's just because of machines or if it's Photoshop. But it's good to sometimes close this and reopen it, the UV flat painting, because if I go back and forth enough, sometimes if I paint over here, I'm gonna lock these two layers. Yep, it still works. Sometimes if you go back and forth enough, or too many times, say it didn't apply over here. This became outdated. So if I close it, reopen it, that information will be there. It is irritating. It's just be careful how many times you go back and forth. And if you do a ton of work in this screen and then it doesn't save on the other side for some reason, just take a screenshot of this or like save this out as a flat image and just lay it on top like another layer or replace the old layer that you painted on. It's happened to me before. You can also sometimes hit a seam and it'll create a streak like that, which is irritating and to watch out for. Something that is nice is setting up your palette in a 3D Photoshop document. So on this 3D layer in this view, I can still create a flat 2D layer above it, which is nice because I can come over here and pick out some of the colors I plan on using. Get a little bit more red for the shadow. Lighter shade and the lightest shade. And then I'm actually going to grab a little bit of a greenish color to mix into the wood. But what's nice is, so this layer is up here and up in that corner and everything like that. While I'm selected on the 3D layer, I can move around and that will stay up there unchanged. So anytime I want, I can grab these colors and start painting down here. And then if I started painting across materials. If I have another color that I like and I want to save, come up to this layer. There we go. I actually need to get a darker color in here. And then in this barrel, I'm going to delete that layer. And you can still layer things on top of here. So if I want to, I'm going to create a mask for the wood layer because I don't want and I'll put the metal layer on top of it. Whoa. Oops, I need to grab that color. Oh no, it did the glitch. It's not perfect, but I mean, 3D code is expensive. There we go. I'm actually going to use this lighter color a little bit. Is this my brush? Yes, it is. And now I'm just going to kind of chill and paint a little bit. What's up?
We have a question from the chat. All you did was open the Maya file in Photoshop in order to get that layout, correct?
No, you export it as an OBJ. So whatever you're working on in Maya, and sometimes it's a plugin that you have to enable, but usually it's automatically enabled. So select the object with it UV'd and everything like that. File, export selection, come down here and make sure it's an OBJ export. So you can see I already have some. I have the high poly and character, someone else modeled here, Mr. Grumpus. And then export it as an OBJ. And when you import it into Maya, in Photoshop, you'll import OBJs. I think that might actually be the only format that Photoshop takes. And an OBJ will flatten the whole 3D object into... OBJs are flat things. They don't have multiple parts. And I think that's why Photoshop likes it. Because it's not complicated like an FBX or a Maya file. Actually, there's some other colors I want to get here. Some of them I like to get by... So a lot of what I'll do, depending on how complex the character is, I'll paint on the 3D object where I need to pay attention to where seams are, as well as where shadows are. And then when I get really detailed, that's when I go straight into the UV and start painting on there, because I can zoom in much easier. Yeah.
Well, I don't know if I missed this stuff, but it's like... Yeah, like when my brush size is like that small, but then it's coming out here.
It's because if you go to your UV, your brush is probably a lot bigger.
But it just looks different?
Yeah.
Okay, so just make it smaller.
Yeah.
There's a lot of back and forth.
Huh? And when you save your Photoshop file in the end, you'll save it from the 3D object, and it'll keep all the painting info and everything like that. And right now, if I select a color from here, it is not going to be the same color I selected from here, because right now there's lighting information. So these two, if you look at the left over there where my color picker is, it is darker. So what I'll use the lighting for is figure out where the seams are and the planar changes are. So I understand that underneath where the metal rim of the barrel will be is darker. So what I'll do is I'll paint where that stuff is. So I'll grab a dark gray. I'll try a cooler gray. And paint. Oh, you know what? That's not going to work because I'm painting on a layer with a clipping mask. So paint down there on that shadow, and then I can paint a lighter gray up here. So I can see that planar change, and then when I come in here, I can see it and paint it. So I know where those planar changes are, so I can lay that out on this shaded version with flat colors. So I'll usually do flat colors and some gradients first. Then when I get detailed, or I want to paint more detailed on here, so you can go to the 3D tab, which is right next to layers, and click on the scene. And over here where it says surface, you can select solid. Right now it's on solid. If I do unlit texture, it'll flatten out the whole thing. But now these are the accurate colors that I have. And this is why it's kind of helpful to have that UV Like if you do the UV snapshot and lay it on there, because I can still see where those planar like where the changes are just based on the UV. Nailed it. Oh man, this is a worse painting than I did last year. I'm not even going to finish this because I'm going to paint on my frog, who I never get to paint on.
When you're painting on the 3D object, do you paint on the actual object layer, or do you make a layer above it and paint on that?
So actually, so this barrel layer right here, this really doesn't count as like a painting layer in any way. It actually, so if I double click on the UV over here, you can actually see that this UV itself has its own layers. So I can add any numbers of layers over here to mess around with it. I can do hue shifts, layer changes, everything like that. And then the 3D over here has its own set of layers as well. So that top layer up here where I have some of the color information, and down here where it's a 3D object. So it contains two different sets of layers. Which sometimes takes a little bit of getting used to, but in the end, I'm really happy it has it because it's really nice to be able to mess around with the different layers, which is always one of the advantages of Photoshop. Though typically in the end, I really end up only using one layer when I do a paint. The dwarf I did for the Blizzard contest last year, that was all on one layer. And that's usually just how I work.
So you add the layer in the 2D view?
Yes.
And then go back and it'll
Yep. Whatever layer I'm selected on the UV, that's the layer I'll be painting on over here. That's why when I tried to paint on the metal rim there, it wasn't painting because I was on a clipping mask of this. It's actually too bright. Yeah. Get that smudge tool. Actually, I want a little bit more red in here. And normally when I paint, some people don't always know about this if they're new to Photoshop or not. I always go into the brush settings and make sure that the shape dynamics is set to my pen pressure and that the transfer is also set to my pen pressure, because I know some people maybe don't know about it, but if you have these two selected, so pen pressure, it's obvious how hard I press the pen, does that. And then this is also the pen pressure, so there's the opacity. And then if I press harder, and it makes it easier for blending. So instead of having to come up here and change my opacity and do it and layer it like that, it's just all based in my pen pressure and my own control. And then you can apply that to a lot of brushes. And right now, I really start off with just the airbrush for a long time, and then I start applying some textures. So if I'm doing a wood texture, I'll lay in like a gradient with a more red on the bottom, lighter up top. And then we actually have a plane change up here because the barrel slants. Huh, I never noticed that. That is a weird deformation. It created more triangles than it needs. I'm going to have to go in and clean that up because as it didn't split up the quad into 2 triangles, it split it up into 4, which is unnecessary. Never noticed that.
how does that affect it?
It doesn't affect it with painting. It just affects, you know, the poly count as if it were going into a game or something. And they're just unnecessary polys.
But if you take the UV that you're, I mean the
Oh, if I
just
did
apply
that,
it to your old one that's not split?
It should, as long as you didn't really change it. Like if the actual topology, or the topology can change a little bit, but as long as the mesh itself doesn't gain more polys, taking away edges usually doesn't change the UV too much. Adding edges and adding polys usually does, because those UVs are new and haven't been like planar mapped or anything like that. But if I just took away an edge right here, that quad would still be there.
Triangulate when you put it into
OBJs usually naturally triangulize, and for some reason, I guess it just decided that this needed to be 4 triangles.
I mean, since I work in animation, they don't normally.
Yeah,
do triangles.
you don't, no, you don't really use triangles,
But
I
when
think.
when I export my OBJs, I don't have problems with triangles. But
Really?
I just put it into Photoshop and it has triangles, so that's
Yeah,
Okay, so Photoshop did that?
usually OBJs do have triangles. I think.
I'm not sure if it was the export.
What's up, Spencer?
Unless getting that view on the
Oh, that's, yeah, sure. Oh wow, the color's super weird on the projector. Didn't notice that. I remember that last year too. It's much more muted on my computer. Less red. So, in getting to this flat view, I'm going to close out of it. Don't need to save it. So, on my 3D barrel here, on the barrel layer, the barrel 3D layer, you'll see that there's texture, and in the diffuse right here, there it says unwrap base shader, and that's just what it was named when I exported it from Maya. So if you double click on that, it opens up over here. And then whatever layer I have selected on this is what I'll be painting on over here. And you can also turn off that UV layer up here. So in the properties of 3D Paint, you can turn off UV overlays. And by naturally 3D, the 3D tab on Photoshop here, it doesn't have the color info, so I'm just gonna get those color tabs back.
My OBJ file's still in quads, but
Really?
but the Photoshop, when I put it in Photoshop, it's in tris.
I think.
So I don't know.
Oh, is that in Roadkill?
Yeah, I just put it open.
Oh, so I believe OBJs, like the Roadkill will take it and make it quads for UVing.
So if I import it back into Maya, I still have my same model that I had when I exported it.
I know if you put it in a game engine, it will triangulate it.
Okay, so just that's something.
Because everything always does come back down to triangles in the end anyway.
But for
Everything's triangles.
But for painting, it doesn't affect it. That
That-
I'm working on a triangle.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Everything's triangles. That's actually, even in our brains, we see everything in the world as triangles when we're judging distance from things. It's cool. Triangles are everything. What was I doing? What was I doing?
To remember these triangles.
I don't remember. I don't care. Does anybody have any questions? Because I'm just gonna kind of chill and paint, answer anything. If anybody has questions about the Blizzard contest and maybe how to get started. Was that assured that I should answer the question that I proposed myself?
Yeah.
So, what do you do when it's getting behind? How do you prevent that?
Getting behind.
Yes, I painted on the planar view, but it's not reflecting that.
Oh, so in the planar view, if you want to save that and everything like that, you can go into File and just save it as a PNG. And then when you open up the planar view again, you can import it and paste it or put it back on there. I did that a couple times when I painted my dwarf. I did a ton of details on the hand. And that's part of the reason I typically work in one layer, because then I don't have to worry about different layers and everything like that. It just feels more naturally like painting. And the only time I use a lot of layers is when I do different adjustments, levels and stuff like that. But yeah, I did all the details of the hand and none of it transferred over. So I saved the hand out, everything that I painted as a flat image, opened up went back to the 3D, opened up the flat view again, and just pasted it all right back in place because the location isn't going to change. Lay in some details of wood grain. And actually make it darker as it gets further down.
Can I just ask one more question?
What's up?
So
I'm sorry, Lisa.
this still isn't updating between this one and this one.
I accidentally wrote Joe.
There you go.
And I'm probably going to turn off the stream in just a little bit because from now, unless anybody on the stream has any questions, we are going to record this and probably post it on our page. But from now on, I'm pretty much just going to answer questions and have fun painting this. And I guess actually I'll give a sneak peek at the frog because I'm probably going to paint him more because I like painting him more. God, I don't remember what the last one was. Whoa, yep. So this is where I am with the frog. So I'll block in a lot of, so you can see where I started blocking in, where I'm going to put highlights and shadows and things like that. But yeah, this is the froggy. Look, a frog. Because because of the way, like same with the hat, and the reason the lantern is missing is I'm going to paint each of the objects separately so that it's much easier to paint them. So I'll actually just import the eye by itself and paint directly on the eye because it'll be easier to paint on the eye without having to worry about accidentally hitting the eyelid or something like that. And same with the lantern because it'd be weird to navigate with that lantern in front of him because it was way far ahead of him. But right now I can just rotate from his center and paint like that.
Yeah.
And right now this is what his UV looks like and everything like that. So I like to lay in a lot of flat color. It's been a long time since I've worked on this. I just started. So I like to lay in a lot of flat color and then start coming in and painting the shadows and everything like that. And I actually need to cool down the skin because I'm going to be cooling down this skin tone and making this a much cooler green, whereas his raincoat is going to be a much warmer color. And I mean, yeah. I don't even like that wood grain. And knowing this, it's going to be upset with me. Yep, right. Can transfer.
Do you mind telling us on this room if you came with the other
All right.
A whole bunch of questions.
Yeah,
So
What's up?
many. I have so many questions.
And I will sit here and answer them in the future.
What are we referring?
If
Alright, but you have to go to the checkout. Like the other one, you can just basically check out.
So I'm going to be wrapping up the stream, and we're going to record me painting. And any questions that anybody has, just feel free to email me at robertlauer.design@gmail.com. You can email me some questions and everything like that. I'm going to finish working on this paint, and hopefully I'll have the frog in the Blizzard contest too. And anybody watching the stream or who is here, I encourage you all to try the Blizzard contest, just because I learned so much just doing it.
So I pull that up on the
Oh, yeah, sure. I can pull up my Blizzard contest paint. Oh, God, it's been so long. It was the first time I had ever 3D painted a character. And since then, I've learned so much. Where is it? Earthen? Yep, here he is. Woo! get up close, you can see which areas didn't have as high of resolution. I probably could have cleaned this up a lot more. Whew. But you know, his nose actually doesn't have that detail there. I just kind of painted in those hard edges and like highlights. Same with the brow and a lot of the edges and everything like that. And opening up his UV. So yeah, really, this is what it really looks like. I had 3 layers. I have a base color layer, the everything else layer, and then glows. So wherever the crystal was, I added a little bit of lighting and glowing to places. And you can actually see that this is a recovered file because it crashed at one point. And I'm so thankful that it recovered because I believe it crashed the final night before the contest was due. Yeah. But, I mean, I got it in. I did a thing. And you can see how low res the foot is and everything. And actually, this character is animated on my demo reel. So sometimes people take their models and they'll sculpt poses, or they'll even rig and animate them later. And this is my website here, or my portfolio site that's slowly loading. You can do it. You can tell it's my work. So I ended up going back in and rigging him just because, again, I just wanted to do stuff, and this was one of the first characters I ever really rigged. I still want to go back and do more animation with him. Ah. And all right, everybody. Oh my God, get out of here. So thank you, everybody, for staying awake for the most part during my presentation. And if anybody ever wants to ask me questions on UVing or like UVing and modeling is really where I fall into place. I really like painting, but it's something I'm still learning and everything like that. So I'm going to wrap it up. Thank you, everybody, on the stream. Have a great day, and I'll stay in contact.